When I was about 3, my mom, who was a single mother to 4 children at the time, was going through a divorce with my father, and my father left. So in a way of spiting him, she dropped all 4 of us off on a corner of my aunt's house, who was my father's sister, and called the house and said, "You have to pick the kids up," and left us there. We wound up staying with my aunt for a little bit, but my aunt had 4 kids of her own, so it was very overwhelming for her. So she called Child Protective Services. They came and they removed me and my brothers, and my sister stayed because my aunt had a daughter, only one daughter, and wanted to keep my sister there as a playmate for my cousin. Me and my brothers went into a children's shelter. Weirdly enough, I remember having to scrub the tub after every time I took a bath. And I must have been about 4, but the shelter was okay. I didn't experience any abuse that followed from that point forward. We got bounced around in foster homes, me and my 2 brothers. At one point it was me and 1 brother, but my brother and my foster father had gotten into a fight, and I still have the memory of him dragging my brother by the ankles as my brother kicked and screamed. They only removed my brother, and they kept me there. And then I wind up seeing my sister. Now my sister comes into the foster home, and unfortunately, my sister experienced some type of from the foster father. So we were removed, me and my sister, and then me and my sister were placed in a foster home together, a different foster home. And I stayed in that foster home for the remainder of my time in the system. When me and my sister were in that foster home, the foster home wasn't physically abusive, and this is where I think I started experiencing all different types of, I had not experienced at that point yet, but I remember having a tremendous fear of my foster father, and I had wet the bed every single night, and every single night that I wet the bed, I was punished. And then my mother, from what I understood, went to jail for abandonment, so she did some time in jail for what she did. She fought to get us back, and she did. And I remember when we first started visiting her, we had to meet in a room with the tinted windows, and I didn't know who she was. And I remember kind of crying and saying, "You're not my mom, you're not my mom." So I pretty much had already started losing touch with who she even was, because she was gone for so long. She did wind up getting us back, so we were all together at that time, me and all my siblings. But that's when I experienced her and not being around healthy people or safe people. And there were a lot of shady people brought into the house, and she was a barfly. So she would sit until the bar closed and bring somebody home. So it was just very uncomfortable at that age for the first time, seeing people naked and being scared. She never took accountability for anything. She never showed love, compassion, empathy. I never got any of that from her. But I was lucky enough that I received that from my sister, because my sister was just such a beautiful person and took over that role of a mother for me. So I am thankful that I had my sister for the time that I did. I was 26 when she passed away. So it's crazy. She was 32, and I've surpassed her age, which is it's crazy when you think about stuff like that. If anything, it's a very big inspiration to me, because I feel like I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for her too. When I think about it, I'm unfortunately, my sister she falls under the statistic of what this type of childhood is like. I try to remind myself that just from her being in my life for that short time, and me having the admiration and the love and respect for her, makes me want to be that type of person for my children. So my brother began when I was about 9. The first time I remember it happening, I was asleep, and me and my sister shared a room. I remember being awoken by him. I wasn't sure what was going on. So as he pulled me closer to him, he said, "We have to have because I need to practice." And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah." He basically pinned me down and I remember as it was happening, it hurt so bad that I was telling him to stop. This hurts, stop. I remember from that night after, I was terrified to go to sleep. There were times where I would sleep in the closet of my bedroom and like put clothes on top of me in hopes that when he came to look for me, he didn't find me. There was another time where I had slept under my bed, and I do remember him pulling me out by my ankles because he found me, and he raped me again. He was in a lot of trouble growing up. He was in and out of juvenile detention centers. There were times where he was gone for months because he was in juvenile jail for stuff that he did. And my mom knew that he was just such a terror to the family that she would just take it away. She never took any initiative to really protect us or fix the issues or get him any type of help that he needed. I do remember telling my mom. I remember talking about it with my other brother that I was very close with, telling my sister. But everybody was scared of that brother. Even my own mom. She used to lock herself in her room when she would sleep just so he wouldn't go in there. I did vocalize it. There was just no protection in place. When I started really understanding psychological things about people, I started doing research on, the type of that are suffered at the hands of they're psychopaths. As a kid, he would torture animals. And I remember crying because I'm like, no, and he would still do it. It was like getting a kick out of someone being scared and being afraid. He went to juvenile detention center once for lighting a building on fire. This is a building that had many, many apartments with people residing in it. And his excuse to why he burned the building or started the fire in the building was because he was running after a kitten and the kitten ran into the building, so he thought he would just light it on fire. And then to have that child mind grow up into an adult, he's very to his wife. And it became very hard for me to come by and even just spend time with her. As me and my sister-in-law would talk and I would hear about these things that were going on in the household, it reminded me so much of what I was leaving and what I was getting away from. I kind of wanted to just like shake her and be like, leave. I don't hold judgment to the people who are still in those situations because she's still in that situation. So I just separated myself, and there was a lot of confusion, a lot of anger, and some of them even turned on me. There were way too many times in my childhood where the people that my mom brought around us violated me as well. There was one gentleman in particular that was always with my mom. This person was helping her out financially. Since my mom was, these people would come over and drink with my mom, and they would be drinking all night. And I remember there was a friend of hers that me for over 2 years. I was in 5th grade, and I remember I had a best friend who I had told this to. In school, they were giving a talk to the kids about what you should do when someone touches you inappropriately and what that looks like and what that is. And I remember sitting in the class and kind of like bumping her because there were more than one grade. She was like, you should say something, you should say something. And I was like, no. I got called to the office. There was a policeman there. They were like, is it true? Your friend told us that someone was touching you inappropriately. I denied it. I was so afraid that if my mom's friend got in trouble, then my mom wouldn't have the money for the rent. My mom wouldn't have money for the food. He would give me money. He would give me candy. He would give me, things that for that time, it's like as a kid, it just kind of snaps out of your head and you're like, ooh, candy. So that was one person in particular that the proper steps were taken because my mother wasn't involved and the school was what did it. So they did take me down to the courthouse, and I remember sitting in a room, again, with the mirrored windows, kind of like how it was when visitation when I was younger. And he got arrested, and we had Child Protective Services involved. I was crying the whole time that I was being interviewed by the cops and everything because I just knew my mom was going to me. The Child Protective Service worker was like, don't worry about it. And I remember him making me feel safe. I get home, of course, my mom was fuming. And not many days later, he was back at my house. And we didn't even get to go to court yet. So now I was even more fearful. One day I used to rummage through my mom's top drawer. Feel like every kid does that. They feel like there's some hidden gem in the top drawer. And I remember digging through the top drawer and finding paperwork stating that the case against this gentleman were dropped. So unfortunately, that gentleman still remained in my childhood life up until I moved out when I was about 16, 17 years old. I try to rationalize why my mom has done the things she's done as an adult, as a mother, right? It really makes me think that it could have been intentional. That's just one person. There were a few of these instances. Once she had asked me to babysit for one of her friends. They were going to a concert and I babysat the kids. I knew the kids. I loved the kids, adored the kids, right? And I woke up to in the middle of the night to this guy with his hand between my legs, trying to wake me up. I don't really even know, but I remember the minute I felt it, I froze. And it was like, I went right back to that 9-year-old child. So I jumped up and I ran into the bathroom and I locked the door and I was just crying. And I was just like, gosh, how the heck am I getting out of here? I didn't even really know where we were. It was the first time I had ever been to this gentleman's house because he always came to our house. I was terrified to leave that bathroom. I was just having a major panic attack while I was in there. And he was on the other side of the door apologizing profusely and saying, I'll take you home if you want. I'm so sorry, Michelle. I can't believe I did that. I should have never did that. Please come out. Please come out. And I remember staying in there long enough to where I didn't really hear anything. And I remember sneaking out and just kind of booking it out of that house. And I had a boyfriend at the time. It was my high school boyfriend. And I called him. I didn't tell him what happened because I remember there was a time in my life where I felt like there must be something I'm doing that has these things happening to me. So when I moved out at about 16, I first got an apartment with my good brother. My mom was always in toxic relationships and they were very, even physically, there were many times where we had to look for mom and we had to call hospitals and find out what hospital she was at. I took her in once. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe. It was hard to breathe. And when I got up from the bed, my mom was sprawled out on my couch and my stove in my kitchen had all the burners on because she was cold. The back of my stove was melted, like the tiles, the linoleum tiles were melting. And that's what that smell was. It was the smell of that heat. And I remember flipping out and screaming at her, waking her up. She started cursing at me left and right. I was like, you could have killed us. And I woke up the next morning to go to work. And when I came back, there was a note left on my living room table saying that she didn't want my help anymore and I had no right to talk to her like that. Those type of things happened every now and then with my mom, and she would bounce from child to child and kind of stay. And then it got to the point where once I started having kids, I was like, I'm not an option for that. So then from there, I lived with my sister for many years because she had a baby. My niece was like my world. She still is. So I lived with my sister probably until my niece was 6 or 7. And that's when I met the father of my children. We moved in, got married. Well, we moved in, my sister passed away in between me moving in and us getting married. And then we had children pretty quickly because my daughter's 11 and then, 8 and 7. So things progressed pretty quickly once we started having kids, and anybody who has kids knows that it's not easy. And having 3 is not easy. Having one of the kids being autistic wasn't easy. His mom was and still is such a blessing. Thankful that my kids have that loving grandma because they don't know my mom. I would say know that it's not your fault. And know that rationalizing or trying to rationalize why this happened to you, it will keep you in the state of fear. And I feel like once you're able to let go of that fear, the inherited shame, the inherited guilt, you're able to trust in yourself more, build yourself back up. And the ultimate goal is to believe in yourself, because if I wasn't able to find the trust within myself, I think I would have crumbled the second I tried to make the changes that I did. I started my YouTube channel because I realized that as I was making the changes that I was, every step in the way was so crucial and so important, but it goes by so fast. I wanted to document everything that I was going through, even the smallest of tools that I learned to put on my tool belt, because I know how crucial every little step of that is, and I wanted to be able to share that with anybody who could relate to it. And I remember the day where I would see people talk about their story and I'd go, oh my gosh, I could never do that. But I'm here and I'm doing it. And anytime someone reaches out to me, I never turn my eye. I always try to help in any way that I can. One thing that I always say is that I hope that I'm placed in the path of someone who needs someone like me, whatever that looks like. I know I can't walk past certain things. I can't see certain things and not say something. So if someone needs me to be their advocate, please find a way to place them in my path, and I think about that every single day. Every day I set that intention to be something helpful for someone, because that makes me feel good, because I know what that's like and I know how important it is to receive it when you need it that bad.